Welcome to In Talks With, I'm Danielle Radoichin. For this episode, I travelled to Kettle's Yard, the contemporary art gallery in Cambridge, to meet Megan Rooney, a Canadian artist known for her diverse and interdisciplinary practice encompassing painting, sculpture, installation and performance. Kettle's Yard is the charming art gallery and house that was originally the home of Jim Ede, a former curator at the Tate Gallery, and his wife Helen. From the mid-1950s until the early 70s, the Edes resided at Kettle's Yard and created a space to display their impressive personal art collection, which includes works by Miro, Henry Moore and Ben Nicholson. The house is arranged to maintain its domestic atmosphere, blending art with everyday objects to create a truly inspiring environment. The gallery also hosts temporary exhibitions, as well as concerts and educational programmes, the most recent of which is a showcase of Megan Rooney's work, her first solo exhibition in the UK, including a site-specific temporary mural, a series of paintings, a dance performance and a book. Megan Rooney was raised in Canada and is now based in London. Her work explores themes of identity, memory and the human experience, blending abstract forms with narrative elements. Her vibrant, large-scale paintings and immersive installations are characterised by a dynamic use of colour and texture. She has exhibited internationally, including at prominent institutions like the Serpentine Galleries in London and the Louis Vuitton Foundation in Paris, and she's recognised for her innovative approach to creating evocative, experiential art. I sat down with Megan to discuss her latest offering on the eve of the exhibition opening. Start by saying hello. Hi,
Hello.
Megan Rooney, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast here today. We were just discussing the poster for your show, which is starting here today, or this is the press preview today. The show opens and it runs until October this year, I believe. Tell me how you're feeling about the whole thing now that you've seen it all in situ.
It's always quite strange when you make a site-specific work in a very short period of time to come back and see it finished because it's only just been born. You get a really strong sense in this exhibition of the two kinds of poles of my practice. One which happens in the studio over a protracted period of time, and the other which happens site-specifically directly on the walls of the museum. And I really like to kind of play with time in painting in this way through a kind of contrast between the works on canvas and the works that are directly on the wall.
So the exhibition comprises of a mural. Where there's one room which has been completely painted by you, which is a temporary mural for the duration of the show. And then there are an accompanying 7 pieces hanging in an adjacent room, and then there's another piece hanging inside the house.
The historic Kettle's Yard house. Yeah, so the exhibition has been conceived of in these different distinct categories. The first family of paintings in Gallery 1 are made, and I think of my paintings as family groups. It's really important that they have a kind of sibling rivalry or a dynamic that kind of propels each painting forward during its making process. And that's a very slow, long, drawn-out conversation that happens over roughly about a year. So I work on numerous canvases at any one given moment in the studio, kind of transferring between the surfaces. And I like to build up the layers really slowly. I come from a printmaking background, an intaglio printmaking background. So I started kind of image making in the reverse, because with intaglio you're etching, so you're doing everything backwards and waiting to then ink the plate after it's been burned into the copper and see the result. So I unearth lots of different forms and marks and stains and different iterations of the painting's life on the surface by taking a grinder, a power sander, and scraping and sanding away layers of paint to then go back into the surface. So it's a very idiosyncratic process, and this unfolds over the months in which the paintings develop a kind of personhood or identity, distinct and unique to each individual work. I think that's possibly why there's also a very strong feeling of time in the canvases that's both quick and slow.
Yeah. What about, so the time is obviously, so it feels important here, the word time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you, hours, well, which relates to time, yeah. So hours and echoes, so why, I mean, words are obviously important to you. You name your, you're very evocative with the names of your work, so why did you choose those words?
The paintings get their titles at the very end of their life cycle, so I name them when I'm closing down the image, and they are usually evocative of the time of the day that the painting was made in when it came to the end of its life. So eventually, to give a kind of description, because obviously people aren't looking at the paintings as we have been, one of the paintings in this exhibition is called Lean Twilight, and it has a very strong turquoise and vibrant kind of night scene palette, as if almost looking into a reflection in a pond, because my paintings have a strong connection to the natural world. I kind of think of them as ecosystems or barometers, so they hold the energy and the weight of time and color as it relates to the particular weather that was taking place when the painting was made. So, as you may or may not know, it has been the wettest spring on record in the UK since record keeping practices of weather began, which means that there is this super strong blue, turbulent, stormy mixture of paintings that have been blowing around as I have been responding to what has been the atmosphere of what the paintings have lived through. So
that's interesting, because the mural is primarily a blue colour. I felt when I walked in.
Yeah, and that was very that was a huge surprise to all of us, actually, because what I had envisioned was that we were going to transfer between Gallery 1 and Gallery 2 would be much warmer, because the time of the year that I was going to be making the mural was closer to the onset of summer. So I had envisioned a very warm, bright yellow mural, and actually what happened was we had an incredibly wet install period again, and so blue chased out yellow, and the mural responds to the light conditions in which it's made, because especially in that gallery we have access to natural light coming in. So the mural I paint with natural light as a response to really three different elements: the architecture, the cherry picker, that's what I use as the forklift to move through the space.
The cherry picker?
Yeah, so I'm painting on a forklift, essentially. Right. That's how I catapult myself through the space.
And that's called a cherry picker?
Well, in North America we call it a cherry picker.
I love that.
They would call it a scissor lift here. But that is the kind of three-way collaboration: my body, the cherry picker, and the architecture. And the architecture always has the advantage of arriving first. It's here before me, and so it is the thing that I am launching a response to. The painting is obviously, well, not obviously, but for those of you who will eventually see it, it takes up the entire room. So it has been made in an 18-day period in the lead up to this exhibition, very much as a response to what has happened on canvases in the other gallery.
Okay. I was actually, you started to answer my next question, actually. I was interested in your whole preparation for something like this. Did you spend time in the space looking at the light? Do you live nearby? How does it work? What's the prep like for a project like this?
it's very risky to take on architecture in a site-specific way with a very short creation period, because neither myself nor the institution knows what they're going to get. In the end, the painting is not made with preparatory sketches. It doesn't have, it's not paint by numbers. There isn't a plan as such. So you both have to have a kind of super strong feeling of trust to be able to embark on a process that is really erratic and idiosyncratic and can fail. You ride really close to failure when you work like this, because if you don't get out in time, as in you don't finish, you can't open the show. So it also, by necessity, creates a more immediate response to color, which I think is interesting as a maker, to be able to go between these two poles. Whereas in the studio, there is a much longer life cycle to the painting so that you can work with color in a different way. So I like to think of the murals as a way of foregrounding kind of radical impermanence, because everybody that comes in to see this show will know that inevitably at the end of the exhibition, they're going to paint these walls white again. And the mural will disappear. And that, for me, is this kind of liberating aspect, actually. It's a way that now you can hear the bells at Cambridge. It's a kind of liberating factor for me, because it's not commodifiable. So that part of the practice is not bought or sold. It's shared, and it's a shared experience then for the people that get to see it. Who, the great majority of people that go to art exhibitions are not going there to buy things. They're going to have conversations, to, understand something about the times that we live in. They're thinking about their own experiences and bringing that to what they see. So the mural is this way of unleashing that and really putting that at the foreground of what is something that I think is really important, which is that public spaces are community building spaces. And it's a free entry point into a language that also finds its root in a very long tradition of mark making on walls. This is something that humans have been doing.
I love how you
forever.
Yeah, and I love how you think about the audience and how they're interacting with it. That really reflects something that Jim and Helen Ede, who lived in Kettle Yard and who are the creators of the gallery here. That was their ethos, that art can transform lives. And I was really taken by a quote of yours that's on the wall as you come into the room that has contained the family, as you call them, of works. And you said that something like one of the aims of your pieces is that it encourages people to stay a while in front of them. So to spend time interacting with it, absorbing it, and also this idea of slowing time down a bit. These are thoughts that came to my mind as I read that quote, but I thought that was really nice. Did you spend time reading up on Jim and Helen and thinking about them, and could you feel their sort of imprimatur on the space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anyone that comes to Kettle's Yard is immediately struck by this kind of destabilizing effect that the historic house has, which mixes, quote unquote high art with rocks and stones and old china with chinks out of it, and Helen Frankenthaler paintings with Barbara Hepworth sculptures. It really has this way, because the house is also a space where you are invited to sit on the furniture, look at the plants, look at some of the incredible work, but it has, for me, a kind of destabilizing effect. Suddenly you realize what art and life is actually about. And I think it's quite a unique experience to be able to do that, because often in historic houses and public collections, you're not meant to touch anything or go, into the rooms. And you really got a sense that this was a very different kind of space where artists were coming to have conversations, to talk and meet and sit in the library and research. And in that sense, I think the invitation to mount an exhibition here is quite personally moving, I guess I would say. In no uncertain terms was it really exciting to be able to add to this conversation that's been a very long brewing one. And I think from my own personal background as a maker, I came from a family that had a very similar ethos to what I see at Kettle's Yard. So my mother, Moira, and my father, Tim, my mother would have, how do I say it? I think I owe my making eyes to my mother and the way that she helped me to translate and process what I was seeing from a very early age. She thought of the house that we lived in as this living, breathing thing. And it changed and evolved with us. And she had a very strong sense of my necessity from a young age to do things with my hands and to want to make. And she kind of fostered that in a very liberal way, which, is definitely why I'm here.
Yeah, so this was a house you grew up in Toronto, and
outside of Toronto, it's a small town, but I say Toronto because no one's heard of the place.
What's the small town called?
It's called Markham.
Markham. Yeah. So you grew up in Markham in a house that your mother painted a certain colour of pink.
Mm-hmm. Flamingo pink.
And then you also painted something on the walls of the house.
On the back walls of the veranda, yeah. I didn't think of it as my first mural, but in hindsight, it kind of was the beginning of something. But my family, I was born in Cape Town in South Africa, and my family moved from Cape Town to Rio de Janeiro because my father was working in the music industry. And then we ended up settling in this small town called Markham. And it was really an act of rebellion on my mother's part because it was a very conservative, hermetically sealed kind of, stereotypical neighborhood with brown, beige walls, houses, blue houses, picket fences. And we had never seen snow actually for the first time. So it was a complete climate change and a complete culture change. Our house in Rio de Janeiro was perched on the side of a mountain, kind of surrounded by jungle, looking at the Corcovado, which is the statue of Christ. So there really couldn't have been a more different translation to this new life that we embarked upon. And I really think that it was her way of kind of saying, we're going to do this our way. And the flamingo pink, even though it sounds quite, houses in South Florida are pink, and in other places it's not a big deal, but in this particular town it caused quite a stir.
Can you remember how you felt? I think you were 11 when you painted that mural.
Yeah.
Can you remember how you felt then? Were you sort of embarrassed that your mum was drawing attention to you, or were you cool with it? How did you feel?
We definitely developed a personhood around the women that lived in the pink house. I have two other sisters, and it was always, the pink house. They live in the pink house, because nobody lived in a pink house. And I think that's when I started to understand the emotional effect of color and how it can penetrate you and get inside of you, and how rebellious color it can actually be. And I don't think I was embarrassed, but it definitely made us different. We also had lots of quirks that weren't Canadian. My mom, on the very coldest days of winter, would put garbage bags, under our ski clothes, garbage bags for extra insulation. What a mad thing. Only someone that had never lived in a snowy climate would even come up with this crazy idea. So I think because she fostered also such a strong sense of making as part of my childhood, I was able to do things like paint my bedroom different colors, and I got to feel what it was like to sleep in Naples yellow versus peach cobbler versus, everyone goes through painting their room black phase. that didn't, last very long for me. But she was quite, and still is, very liberal with the way that the house exists as this entity to be discovered, changed, evolved. And that has penetrated into the way that I work. So it was always there, I would say. She's actually here, my mom.
I was about to ask.
Yeah, she's at the Botanical Gardens at the moment, but she will be here tonight.
She's an avid gardener.
Yes, she is. Yeah, she cultivated every inch of what is an acre around this house into something that I think of as a sculpture, a living sculpture.
Has she seen the show?
She has not yet. No, because it's the press preview now, and she will be here later, though. She's just arrived from Canada last night.
And your father?
He is not coming on this trip. He's not coming on this trip, but he will come before the show is over, because it's running until the 7th of October. And we do a whole series of performances at the end of the exhibition run. So for the finissage, that will be kind of another moment where the show is activated.
Yeah, tell me a bit about the performance, that takes place towards the end of the run. Is that right?
It plays to the end, but also tonight.
Oh right, okay.
So it's kind of we're thinking of the performance as this kind of bookend. It opens and closes the show. So it's no coincidence that my exhibition Echoes and Hours is opening on the solstice, which is the longest day of the year, because light has this incredible impact on the way I respond to color. This is not a new thing for painters, but it's definitely something that's true about the work. And the performance in this case, Spin Down Sky, so it has a different title. It's a layer in this ecosystem, which is the family of paintings. The mural, the site-specific mural, is going to house or be the habitat for the performance. So the performance has also its own unique story, and that's really about it's a love story between a bolas spider and a night butterfly or a moth, and they find themselves in this kind of forbidden territory. And like all good love stories, it's a tragedy. But that has been very closely developed with the choreographer that I have been collaborating with now since 2017. We first worked together at the Serpentine Park Night, which was, a long time ago now, 2017. And then again, 2019 at the Kunsthalle Düsseldorf for my Fire on the Mountain show. So this is our third performance together.
Tope Jose?
Cutting, yes, exactly. She's also performing the piece and playing the role of the spider.
Right.
So this is a very intricate kind of three-way collaboration between Tammy, myself, and Tyrone Isaac Stewart, who is the sound artist that has created the score to the piece. And Leia is playing the role of the moth or night butterfly. So the exhibition as a whole has really happened over the course of the last year, where we have been kind of in a three-way feedback loop. Tyrone came to the studio in Vauxhall where I work, saw the paintings and started to respond to them sonically. I, in turn, made works on paper, which you can see in the research space while he was playing in response to my painting. This is definitely a first for me. I've never actually worked with somebody else in my studio at the same time. So it was a great kind of new discovery for us. And then it goes a bit kind of out and comes back in. You know, you really have to let collaborators into the piece to bring their own experiences, their own specific history of dance, specific history of sound that they work with. And everyone kind of then goes off and responds to the material, and then we kind of come back and fight and jostle about, wobble about, and then shape it together. But if you don't let the different distinct participants in the collaboration have their own kind of time with the material, it just stays kind of superficial, and I'm not really interested in that. So I really kind of give a lot of freedom and agency, and then I start to kind of nudge in the direction that I have in mind. But that also changes because it's a very organic process.
Why did you want to bring in that element of dance, or what do you feel, and music and costume, what do you feel like it adds to the painting?
Well, I come from a dance background as much as I come from a printmaking background. And when you look at the work, you can really get this sense of movement in the paintings. Nothing I do in the studio is from a position of staticness. It is all in motion. This is a silent kind of performance, or a behind the scenes performance, because it's not filmed. Although for the first time here at Kettle's Yard, we have made a time-lapse video of some of the mural being created. Because people have often kind of wondered what that actually looks like. So it will be available in snippets for people to kind of get a glimpse of. But I think of these things as these categories of dance and sound and painting and performance as overlapping and coalescing and jostling about in one kind of glorious, enchanting, complicated, swirling mess that you try to sort of pick apart and rebuild. And that's how the paintings contain this different feeling of different energies. That's how they develop a kind of personhood, because different motions have been put onto them. Some of those are soft and delicate and detailed, and some of them are more rebellious and aggressive even. There's tension, you're fighting things out on the surface. All of that happens in a process that is movement-based. I'm working with huge brushes.
Is it all...
It's very physical.
Brushes, or do you have a spray gun at any point?
No. The painting is very specifically made by hand.
That's... you must be strong.
Yeah. I guess I am quite strong. I mean, it's taken a beating for sure.
Yeah.
My body, that is.
Yeah.
It's been very labor-intensive. It always is. This is my 6th public mural, and the last public mural was at the LVMH Foundation at the Frank Gehry building at Louis Vuitton for the Color en Fugue show. And
so beautiful and so different compared to this one in terms of the colours. It must have been sunny.
It was sunny, yes, yeah. It was. And in that particular Frank Gehry space, there's a huge portal in the top of Gallery 8. So the sun, the rain, everything came in, but it was a very hot period when I was working in there. So the mural reflected that, to your point. And, I think it's interesting because, I'm obviously getting older. My body is changing. So the way that I paint is also changing and evolving. You're constantly kind of looking for new ways to deal with the limitations of the body and also find new ways to kind of work. But I think it's important work to do with your hands. This somehow brings me back to something that's very tactile and human and fallible, and can be full of mistakes. It's not artificially produced and reproduced. And I think you get that really strong emotional quality when you look at the work, because you know that somebody has painted every inch by hand of this kind of surface. And I think that's becoming kind of a rarity.
Yeah. Would you ever work with studio assistants or have help creating the actual output, or does it all have to come from your actual body?
I've never worked with assistants. I don't quite know how to do that, to be honest. I'm not sure I want to. I think there's something about the process that's not explainable anyway, so I'm not sure how I would invite somebody into that. I think the way that I have been collaborating is with the dancers, with the sound. That physical making is my burden to some degree, although I don't think of it in those terms. But I think that comes back to the impermanence question, which is something that all humans have to face. You know, our time here is not infinite. We all have limits. We all have expiration dates, you know. It's part of the painting's questioning that lets you kind of think about that maybe, or explore what it means to kind of be in a space where you know something is going to be erased. That's also the beauty of dance and live performance. That's so, you know, it's so hard to pin down. It's over here, it's over there. It gets inside of you, and it's to me something so evocative of what it means to be alive and moving around in the world and dealing with, you know, the issues that are facing us all. So, yeah, but whether or not it's possible to do in perpetuity, I don't know. We'll have to see. It's definitely something I really find incredibly meaningful. You grow as a painter 5 years for every mural because the pressure cooker riskiness of it forces the decisiveness. And so when I come out of the process, I'm like, I really have accumulated. It's like having 10 years in the studio in 18 days. You know, I only actually finished the final touches of the mural right before the press view this morning. Wow. It just wasn't quite closed down. So while Andrew, the director here at Kettle's Yards, brilliant collaborator with Amy on this project.
Andrew Nan and Amy Tedden.
Yeah, exactly. They've been, you know, incredibly supportive and patient for what has been a long process. Blue has gone everywhere in this building. I mean, it has tracked into my hotel, into the sheets. It even got into the historic house.
There were splashes of yellow that you've placed throughout as well. That the curator and all the music gallery assistant was telling me about when I went to have a look round. She was pointing out to me how there was yellow in the flowers. There was a very specifically placed lemon sitting on the side in the house itself, and then in your painting in the house there are some dots of yellow placed throughout.
Well, the painting was I had envisioned a yellow painting. Right. That really was kind of what I imagined was going to happen, and then blue chased out yellow. And it just didn't. It came back in little hits because of the sanding process, then revealed what was much earlier kind of color palette.
You went to the University of Toronto, is that correct? And what did you study?
I was doing printmaking, interior printmaking, painting, and video. So I studied with Lisa Steele, which is a great Canadian video artist, and George Hawken, late printmaker. And I was really an interdisciplinary artist, working across.
And you still are.
And I still am, yeah.
So yeah, what I studied. Yes, what you studied, and then I was interested from going there to Goldsmiths, I believe, in 2011.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, tell me a little bit about that transition, because I'm imagining that's what brought you to London, where you live now. Yeah.
Yes, I did. I followed love to London. Initially, it was
like so many of us do.
Many of us do. It was the only city that both my partner then at the time got into school. It was in London, so I was torn between going to study in New York or studying in London, and I ended up in the UK and never left. But the translation from a very small program at University of Toronto, lots of community one-on-one attention with a small group of artists, to Goldsmiths, much bigger college with its obvious long history in the UK with the YBA artists and so on. My interdisciplinary practice was very painting focused, and there was still at that time, funny enough, quite a lot of hostility towards painting in the way that I was, because initially at that time I was painting in a very figurative style, and it didn't go down so well at Goldsmiths.
Because they thought it was too traditional? Or?
Yeah, I think partially it wasn't known as a painting school. In hindsight, it was probably the wrong program to some degree, but because I was really an interdisciplinary maker, I liked that at Goldsmiths you didn't have to pick one specific medium to focus on. So I thought, I'll just do what I have been doing already, all of these different things as they come into the practice at various different moments. But the painting, in my experience there, just was not, I didn't have the right kind of conversations for the work that I was making. So I moved away from painting for a good number of years and moved more into sculpture and language and started to develop performance practice. And then I came back to painting, but it all went around in a kind of big loop. And that started to kind of come back when I lost my studio in London because we got kicked out of one building or another. I think it was the old Rotherhithe Library at the time. And I wanted to participate in a group show that I had been invited to make some work for, and I didn't actually have somewhere to work. And basically I suggested I make a site-specific wall painting. And that's what kind of brought me back to painting. And then it took a hold. And now it's very much the dominant part of my practice. So, things go in waves.
And moving from figurative to abstract was just a part of painting onto the wall, or going back into painting, or?
I'm not sure I could really, to be honest, provide a roadmap for how that happened. I think as a painter, you pass through a lot of different information as you develop your style, or what becomes your style. I mean, it's a really slow process. For me, I think it's been 10 years of working out, and in the last couple of years, I really have felt like it's become my own. And the figure developments have just slowly disappeared, but the body is so present in my work. It's just taken a different form. It's not literal anymore. I never really think of my paintings as resolutely abstract either. They always contain information that comes from observation of people and spaces, of ecosystems, of the things that I'm transferring between.
And what about, because I hear so much about how being an artist in London is so hard. It's so expensive to find a studio space, and I read somewhere you mentioned that you were studio squatting for several years. How was that? How did you overcome that struggle?
Well, I mean, the guardianship scheme, I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with it, but it was something that was brought in as a way of preventing buildings from laying disused and being squatted, basically, as a kind of workaround. And it came from Holland and took kind of fire, spread like wildfire. And it has meant that for the last several years now, I have been working in guardianship buildings all over London, and it's provided very affordable studio rent, with great access to wonderfully unusual buildings. So my current studio, I'm working between two studios. One is in the former Ear, Nose and Throat Hospital, and the other one is in Vauxhall. And they couldn't be more different in feeling and spirit. And the Ear, Nose and Throat Hospital is a Victorian era building, and it looks over Britannia Street.
Yeah, King's Cross.
It's King's Cross. Yeah. It's couldn't be more chock-a-block. And we constantly have this film sets being erected because there's lots of World War II era information around there. So Steve McQueen was shooting down the street where my studio overlooks. A couple of months ago, I came out the shower once, and there was Keira Knightley on the fire escape. There was a Netflix documentary with Keira Knightley. Not a documentary. It's some Netflix thing that Keira Knightley is in, and they were doing some scene, and there were all these young boys who were being held hostage, literally out the window. So the building is very eclectic. Lots of people are making work, and artists, writers, poets, fashion, lots of fashion designers. And that's really great for community building. My partner Benjamin runs a project space in part of the building, called St. Chad's. So there was always artists staying. So it's all these kind of networks coming together of different artists doing different projects. And that is really, galvanizing somehow, and keeps you grounded also. These things are so important though. Benjamin, my partner, is also an artist and a maker. So we've been sharing a studio for the last few years. He works in sculpture predominantly, so it's very different. But these crossovers help fuel your own practice. And that kind of shapes the things that you're looking at, even if it's indirectly.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. It's nice to have a community around you.
Yeah, you can't have dogs in our building though, which is a huge problem. We've got to move at some point because I would really like a dog.
Oh, what kind of dog would you like?
A big dog.
A big dog?
Yeah.
Canadian style?
Yeah, or a lab or something, I don't know.
Oh.
Something to run with, because
You're a runner?
I'm a runner, yeah.
Need a dog in your life?
Definitely need a dog in your life.
Did you grow up with
dogs? Yeah, always. And so did Ben.
I think there's something about that if you grow up
We're
with
dog
a dog.
people.
Yeah, I think if you grow up with a dog.
Don't give me cats. I'm a dog person.
And have you got anything else planned for future post-Kettle or post-Kettle's Yard, or are you just sort of thinking you just need a break? Because it does sound very exhausting, by the way.
I am going on holiday for the summer.
Nice.
To take some time off. We're producing a catalogue, which is being in its final stages of production, with wonderful writers, Amy Tobin, the curator of the exhibition, Emily Labarge, my longtime collaborator and writer, who's been writing beside my work and not about my work for the last decade. I first met her at Goldsmiths. We're finishing up Rebecca Burrell's responding to the painting that was made very specifically for the Kettle Yard house, the house painting. And then the performance is happening. So after that, I'm going to go to Naples.
Oh, lovely.
And get some new information for my work. You have to kind of reset the memory bank.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, listen, enjoy the break.
Thank you.
When you get there, you've got to get through this first, and it's such a fantastic show. I mean, it's amazing. I think it worked so well. I loved it. So thank you, and thanks so much for appearing on the podcast. I really enjoyed
it's great.
it.
It's great to meet you.
Likewise.
Thank you for coming to Cambridge.
Loved it. Thank you. You've been listening to In Talks with me, Danielle Redoitchen. The sound and theme music is by Woogie Productions, and the artwork is by Patrick Waugh. If you enjoyed this episode, please pass it on to someone who you think might also like it. Please subscribe and leave a review. To pitch for guest ideas, you can DM me via my socials at Danielle Redoitchen. Thanks for listening.